Thank you very much, Toronto, University of Toronto, Mr. Chancellor, Mr. President, and all my good colleagues, and all you people here. I thank you all for this honor, and I'm very pleased to be back to my old school of University of Toronto, where I taught in 72 and 73, a fantastic year in my life, which have kept in my heart a great love of Canada and of Toronto ever since. But I shall talk about something else. I have been an architect now for 55 years, and I still am. Being an architect is not really a profession, but it's a way of seeing the world and a way of living, and it's a lifelong thing. I'm still very active in all kinds of ways because I have this creative education. In Denmark, we educate architects rather broadly. We don't divide them very much into building architects and landscape architects, whatever. We have the same degree for all of them, and we look at architects as guys who are involved in creative problem solving with the physical environment. That means that it is designers, graphic designers, industrial designers, furniture designers, landscape architects, urban designers, urban planners, and regional planners. They are all architects in our vocabulary, and they get the same degree, and we think of it, and we think of the education in this area as creative problem solving, and the other important part is the ability to communicate the solutions to people outside our profession. That means that we have to learn skills of drawing, photographing, using modern digital technologies, being able to convey your ideas verbally and so on. But maybe basically for all this is something about that we are able to study and to keep learning all life. I'm sure you have got the same kind of education, and now starts your time for studying and learning. The only thing that we know about the future is that we know very little about it, and what you are going to do 20 years from now, we don't know much about. But you have got here an education, how to study, how to learn, and how to adapt new areas and address the problems of that time. I can just mention with my funny architectural education, which very correctly was very much about the modernistic thinking of the 30s and 40s and 50s. Many of these things was found later on to be not so smart, but that was what we learned. But we learned this basic thing about being critical, being creative, whatever. And I'll just tell you what with my funny little education I've been doing. I started out doing social housing in Greenland. Then I did archaeological diggings and reconstruction with ancient monuments in Greece. Then I worked on restoring medieval churches. Then I worked on designing lamps and altars and organs for churches. And then I got into this research of people and cities, life in the city. So I've also written books in 30 languages and made city improvements in all these cities you mentioned and some more. And maybe the latest thing being that the thing of cleaning up Broadway for traffic at Times Square and a number of other squares in New York, and getting a cleanup in Moscow organized so they can have a more pleasant city over there. It's a very checkered career with the same funny little education. And what is going through all this is creative problem solving, and communication of the results to people so they can understand it. I will challenge you to remember this about not only to study the things, but also communicate them. Now I need this one.
There's one right there. There's a glass.
Because I'm about to end this story, but I'll take this up here and tell you about a British architectural critic, Ken Walpole, who held up a funny figure at one conference and say, "Oh, I feel sorry for you architects, because your means of communication is the still photo and the two-dimensional drawing. By having these ways of communication, you all the time focus on the form. But oh, this is not architecture, this is sculpture. Architecture has very much to do about form and life, and only good architecture can be made if life and form interact in a very, very good way." And then comes the next question that lots of people were all the time, in all the years I've been in the area of architecture, they were studying form and communicating form to each other. It's also easier to study form. It's much more complicated to study life. What is life? And how is the communication, how is the interaction with form, and how does form influence life? We have now found that form influences life tremendously, that we can make a city where people walk and bicycle a lot, or we can make a city where people drive cars a lot. We have a lot of influence in what kind of human settlements we organize. And so my life has been spent lying on my knees, studying mostly life and the interaction of form and life, and finding out all these ways where form influences our quality of life. This is an area which have strong roots in Toronto, because down in Albany Avenue, number 69, lived a stout old lady, Jane Jacobs. Originally, she lived in Greenwich Village in New York. She wrote in 1961 a very famous book saying that if the modernists and the motorists are to dominate this world and the planning of this world, we will have dead cities instead of having great cities. That was her message way back in 61. Later on, she moved to Toronto, and she stayed here for many, many years until her death in, I think, 2005. And she has influenced Toronto quite a bit. I feel that she's a grandmother of this kind. We call it the humanistic dimension in architecture and planning. And she is the grandmother, and she is here from Toronto. And there have been rather few studying all this with people and cities, but more and more cities are now turning their back to the modernistic movement and to the motorist dominance, and wants to be livable, sustainable, and giving people a quality of life and a healthy life by moving more by their own muscles, by somebody else's energy. I will end by telling you about my idol. That was the architect Ralph Erskine, a Swedish-English architect. Ralph Erskine, he was the one who all the time were able both to make the big picture and have fine master plan, very fine site plans, but he always worked right down to the small nitty-gritty details. He put little benches in front of all the entrance doors. He made wonderful front yards and all kinds of considered things so that his areas of living were always fantastic, of a good quality. People loved them, and they treated him as almost like a god, Ralph Erskine. When he was a bit old, we had a television interview, and we asked him, "Ralph, can you tell What does it take to make a good architect? Oh, that is simple. To be a good architect, you must love people, because doing architecture is about making the framework for people's life. And if you don't love people, you can never be a good architect. That was Ralph Erskine. And I will challenge all you guys to all the time keep in mind the people you're working for and the objects and problems you're working, and try and realize that with your education you can do a lot of good things for mankind in its widest connotation. I wish for you graduates a long career in the service of mankind, wherever life will take you, and it will take you all over. And I congratulate you or wish for you the best of luck with your creativity. Keep learning, keep studying, keep doing wonderful stuff for your fellow human beings. Good luck.